Okay, welcome to the Nick and Joe Show, folks. I'm Nick, he's Joe, and yes, it's the real Joe tonight. Joe is with us this evening. He's in town, so we grabbed him and threw him in front of a microphone and a camera, and he's with us. So you'll have the original cast of the show with you this evening, and believe me, he's the smarter of the two, and I look forward to it's great to have him back on the air. Welcome back, Joseph.
What do you tell me? Does the fact that I'm the real Joe mean that you've been having like fake Joes on?
Well, we weren't going to tell you that, but
Okay,
we've had another Joe. We call him Chris, but
right. No, Chris is a good guy. He's great person. Deserves his own show, to be honest with you.
He does. You know, that's something we should talk to him about that. He's down enjoying the warm southern climes in the southern states down there, and he made it safely and living the life of Riley down there. So we hope that he enjoys.
And he didn't have to wear a mask either on the flight down. Well, maybe while he was in Canadian airspace, he did.
Did you watch a video on when they announced the dropping of the mask mandate?
No, I heard about it.
They did it in flight in some cases.
Yeah.
They did it in flight in some cases, and the whole plane cheered, and they tore their masks off. I thought that was great. And now all the Bidenites down there with Sleepy Joe are all melting down, thinking, "How dare a judge become a medical expert?" Well, no, he's a legal expert.
That's right. These guys are not medical experts; they're constitutional experts. And
right, and they said it was illegal. They didn't say it was a good or bad medical policy. They said it was illegal.
Yeah, and one wonders whether or not the mask mandate that still is enforced here on domestic flights, on trains, on intercity buses, etc., whether or not they're actually constitutional, because there is mobility rights in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So it's an open question as to whether or not, in fact, the government has the constitutional power here in Canada to impose that kind of a mandate. But then again, does that really matter? Because we have governments here that regularly ignore the Constitution, and even if they were inclined to follow it, let's not forget that there's Section 33 in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, otherwise popularly known as the Notwithstanding Clause, that gives any government, any provincial or federal government, a legal way of taking their policy and their legislation out of constitutional oversight. So it's just a dog's breakfast, and I know you know what I mean when I say dog's breakfast, Nick.
Oh, do I ever? But what's funny about this is the rest of the world is moving away from these mandates. The United States isn't the only one. There are other places and jurisdictions that are moving away from it. Yet Canada doggedly refuses. I cannot remember the Minister of Transport's name, Agrahab or something like that. And I don't mean to mispronounce it out of disrespect. It's just I can't remember exactly what it is. But right. He says, well, it is what it is. Well, no. You don't inconvenience 6 million, because that's how many people still can't fly in this country. 6 million people, just because it is what it is. You're the one that made it what it is. You can unmake it. All you have to do is say so. And they stick to this like glue, and I don't know why. It's driving me crazy.
Right. Well, we don't even have to go to the international community for an example of the dropping of these mandates. Right here in Canada, provincial governments, left, right, and center, are dropping the mandates. I stand to be corrected, but I think the only province where there's a mask mandate still in force is in Quebec. I know for sure it's still in force in Quebec, but they're planning on dropping it soon as well. Look, the fact is that people get COVID, and we know quite definitively that while it can be a serious illness, there has to be generally pre-existing conditions. We know that afflicts people who are generally weaker and older, and already have these pre-existing conditions. I know plenty of people who have had COVID in the last few months, and who have been mildly sick, if that. And the only reason that they know they had COVID was because they took the government's advice and went and got tested. Of course, I'm not really sure what the point of getting is if you're not really sick, but that's the way it goes. So we don't have to even look at the international community for an example. Right here in Canada, we're not following these mandates anymore.
Yeah.
So why in heaven's name is the federal government dragging its feet on this? I don't know.
Well, you know something, Joseph, I mentioned this to Chris either last week or the week before, but I'll say it again. I think that since the mandates have come down within the country, like to go into a grocery store or go into a restaurant or things like that, people generally are walking around in a little bit better mood. There's more people who are smiling and enjoying, each other's company. It just feels like you've been, I don't want to say let out of prison. That might be a little bit of an overstatement, but there's a burden been lifted off your back that you don't have to worry
Not
about
much,
now.
Nick, not much.
And it's just,
yeah.
Well, anyway, the whole point is there are certainly ways the government could mitigate the impact of COVID over the last 2 years, and simply doing away with these useless masks, because anybody with a brain realizes that these paper masks or cloth masks or rag masks, they do not, they don't work. They're just the modern version of virtue signaling. So, what are we talking about here? Why are we continuing? You're right. I don't have an answer for this either. I think it's a huge inconvenience on way too many people, and the benefits are far outweighed by the negatives.
Well, look,
now,
here's
Chrissy's
the thing,
asking
Nick,
a question in the
when there's been. Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Chrissy is asking questions in the chat room. So she says, do specific flights have the right to give up mask mandates? In the United States, they do. It is up to the airline.
Correct.
That's to the best of my knowledge. Anyway, so Chrissy, I hope that, I know it was brief, but I hope it was a satisfactory answer. That's in the U.S. In Canada, they don't have that right. It's all federally mandated. It's not that. Believe me, as somebody who's worked in the aviation industry, I can tell you nobody in the aviation industry likes this or would do it on their own. So it's federally mandated, and the only reason they're doing it is because they don't want Transport Canada coming down on them. That's why they're doing it. Has nothing to do with health.
And look, I'm not. Here's the thing: is you either believe that masks are effective, or you don't believe they're effective. If you believe they're effective, then by all means wear a mask. You're protecting yourself. But if you're wearing a mask and you believe that they're effective, then what's the point of asking the person next to you to wear a mask? You're already protected by something that you believe is protecting you. So it makes no sense.
Well,
and
that's
it's the same thing with this vaccine business, okay? If you believe that the vaccines are effective and that they're making you immune, then by all means get vaccinated. I'm vaccinated, but if you're protected by a vaccination, then what do you care if the person sitting next to you in a movie theater is vaccinated or unvaccinated? It doesn't make sense. So, and to me, that's the most important thing here. I've tried for 2 years to stay away from the scientific debate, okay? Yeah, I understand there's a science to it. I'm not arguing against science. I'm not arguing against the proverbial the science. I'm just saying that, if the science is correct, then it doesn't matter if I wear a mask, okay? Because I'm not going to infect you if you're wearing a mask. And the same goes for the vaccinations. So the whole thing has been really so contrary to common sense. And I think that's always been my chief objection to it. I'm not really that interested in whether masks are effective or not. Wear a mask. I don't care. I'll tell you this much though. Your analogy about feeling like you're getting out of prison, absolutely. I cannot tell you how pleased I am to be able to walk into my local grocery store and not put a mask on, or a drugstore and not put a mask on, or an office building and not put a mask on. Although you have to wear a mask still in the Parliament buildings, but I mean,
yeah,
go figure. Just crazy.
I want to read a comment from a guy called Wooden Head. I'll bet you he's Dutch. First of all, he says, I'm a trucker in the food industry. I still have to wear a mask. When I go into the process, wear a mask when I go into processing plants. I'm okay with it because I can cover all my ugly.
well,
excuse me. Sorry about that.
Well, Mr. Woodenhead, if you could cover all of your ugly, just wearing one of those masks, you're a very lucky person.
You got that right, because my ugly goes all from head to toe, from right down to the bone. No.
As they used to say, Nick's got a face for radio.
You got that right. I've looked at myself in the mirror, and it is not pretty. So, anyway, but yeah, I just thought I'd highlight the comment because that was that last line, because it can cover all my ugly. I thought, okay, that guy's got a sense of humor. I got to mention that one.
Absolutely.
And by the way, I want to welcome the new listeners to. Oh, absolutely. I do want to mention, though, we've had some new listeners in the last couple of weeks, and I want to thank them for joining the show, and I hope they come back and become regulars, because that's part of the reason why we do this, is to give you a place to come where you hear it from a little more down-to-earth point of view, from a conservative point of view, because there's not many places out there you're going to get this. Now, there was another topic I wanted to get into. What time? Oh, yeah, we get time to dive into this, because I don't want to spend all day on this mask issue. We've talked COVID so much, I'm tired of it. But there is a story, right? If I go back here, I'm talking about, where are you, Doug Ford? Oh, I know where I put it. Hang on a second.
Doug Ford.
Yeah, Doug Ford is spending money like a drunken sailor. And I'm getting mighty tired of people spending money. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, except that drunken sailors generally are not buying your vote. So,
they're spending their own money.
They're spending, they get drunk and Nick, you know what it's like to be in port, right? With all that money to spend. No. I'm sorry, Nick. Nick was never like that in the Navy. Nick was a very straight-laced stoker.
And if you think I'm going to admit to anything else in a public setting like this, you are out of your mind.
Hey, before we get into
the story I was driving at.
Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, Nick. I was going to say
the story I'm talking
about. Before we get into Doug Ford, I just want to
go ahead and say it, Joseph. You're killing me.
Yeah, before we get into Doug Ford and that, I just want to say that I saw the movie Greyhound, and I have to tell you, I did not like it.
Yeah. Oh, you did?
I didn't like it. No.
You didn't?
Yeah, there was.
Why not?
I didn't like the idea of, the notion of a destroyer, turning like a race car every time. I don't know. It's things happen much faster in the movie than they happen in real life.
Of course, but you only have 90 minutes or 110 minutes.
It's true. It's true.
They took some poetic license, but I grant you. And talking to the U-boat talking to you over hydrophone, no, I'm sorry, that was ridiculous too. Two things I really
every time they had to change the channel.
Okay, there's that. But when you looked at the kind of weather they were in and how heavy the seas were, okay, that I thought they did a really good job of portraying what it was like to be on the ocean, on the Atlantic Ocean, in the northern half of the Atlantic Ocean, at a time when they're fighting U-boats, trying to keep convoys alive. And we got a plug. We got a plug in that. That was a recreation through CG of the HMCS Sackville, who actually has a pretty amazing war record in and of itself. So when I watched it, I thought, you know what? Everything being equal, it's an American-made movie. It's going to star an American. It's going to be about Americans during the Battle of the Atlantic, of which they played, I won't say a minor role, but certainly a secondary role to what we in the British played. I taking all that into consideration, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, look, it was on a certain level, it was an enjoyable
movie. Did we lose
movie.
Joseph? No, there he is.
I'm still here. Hi, guys. Can you see me?
Can you hear me? I just lost your image for a second.
Yeah, I know.
I can see you now. Yeah. I can hear you now.
Good, perfect. Anyway, it was a digression. It's not a bad movie as long as you understand that, when you're talking about 30-foot seas, chances are your lookout is not going to catch that periscope at 1,000 yards. You know what I mean? So
yeah, but most people, other than guys like you and I, who have actually been out there in weather like that, they're never going to know that.
No, I realize that.
Like, face it, we are naval snobs when you get right down to it. Like, watch Hunt for Red October. There's mistakes in that I pick up and you might pick up that the average person would never pick up. They wouldn't realize that's, I love that movie. I think it's great. It's one of my favorites. But there are a couple little things in it that drive me crazy, like chrome periscopes. The Russians did not waste money on chrome.
No.
Anyway.
No, it was definitely,
all that said,
it was definitely not a Russian submarine. Let me put it that way.
No. And even the one ping Vasuli, just one.
Mm-hmm.
That was a little bit of a stretch too, but overall, fantastic movie.
Okay.
Now, we can get back to this Doug Ford thing, because Chrissy is good. She wants to disagree with me on this. Let me, Doug Ford, let me get into this. First of all, the story comes to me from the Fraser Institute. Now, here's what you need to know. From the Fraser Institute has put up some numbers about where we'll be in the year 2023-24 with our deficit and our budget, our debt, in the province of Ontario. Never mind nationally, we're talking just Ontario. By 2023-24, the deficit, just how much there is of shortfall from what the government brings into what it spends in that calendar year, will be 21.5 billion with a B. The debt in that year will be $503.3 billion. That's $500 billion. So the question I want to know is, where does this end? Like, we cannot continue to spend money like that. We cannot. How are we ever going to pay this off? This is, I don't know. I'm sure that they've calculated some kind of interest rate rise. But right now, the Bank of Canada not just raise the interest rate by 0.5 of 1 point within the last 2 weeks?
Well, they did, and the interest, the Bank of Canada, the prime rate right now is nowhere near where it's going to have to go in order to tame inflation. I saw that the inflation rate in Canada was today or yesterday. It was reported to be 6.7%. That's starting to get up there. Right. I've made a lot of fun, as you'll recall in some of our previous shows, Nick, about people getting all excited about, that skyrocketing 3% rate of inflation. And I keep on reminding people that inflation, when I bought my first car, I paid something like 24% interest on it, because the inflation rate at that time was somewhere around 13 or 14%. That's a significant rate of inflation. But now we're talking over 6%. It's starting to get up there. And the Bank of Canada raising the prime rate up to, I think it's now 1%, or it's around 1%, is not really going to do it. They're going to have to raise interest rates much higher. And that's bad news for the Treasury, both provincially and provincial treasuries and federally, because that's extra money that they're going to have to pay that they may not have built into their budget projections. But more importantly, that's really bad news for homeowners, people who've gone out and have mortgaged themselves to the hilt in order to buy expensive homes, and they hopefully they've locked themselves into a fairly low interest rate for a period of time. But if this persists, there are going to be people that are going to start losing their homes because they won't be able to afford the mortgage when they go to renew, and find that instead of a 2% interest, they're going to be paying 7 or 8 or 9% interest. So it's a significant problem that we really need to tackle decisively now before it gets out of hand.
Look, you and I are on the same page. I don't think it'll take that kind of an interest rate jump in order to really put people underwater. When you buy a home for $600,000 that 3 years ago was worth half that, okay? If you're getting it today, let's say your interest rate is, pick a number, 2.5%, okay? Variable rate, 2.5%. What happens when all of a sudden that rate doubles to 5%?
Sure.
What does it do to your mortgage payment? Now, if you look at it on the political side, an increase of 1% adds billions to the interest we have to pay on the debt and the deficit, and when we have a deficit, the leftover money, the difference between what they projected and what they had, rolls over to debt. That's how come the debt keeps going up. What's it going to do to our ability to pay that? How much are we going to lose? Buying power goes down because it won't quit printing money. That's a whole nother issue we could talk about. But when it comes to this is why I'm so disgusted with Doug Ford. He just promised to spend $300 billion in healthcare. Okay, well, maybe that's an investment that should be made. But how are we going to pay for it? Doesn't it make sense? You and I have been saying all along that this isn't a healthcare crisis. This is a poorly managed health system crisis. That what COVID did was come along and expose the rot, because COVID in and of itself is not really nearly a catastrophe that we've been told for 2 years it is. So now they come along and they say, we can't collapse on our watch, so we're just going to keep throwing money at it. Now they've dug themselves this huge hole, and they want to try to catch it all up in one go at $300 billion. Where is it going to come from?
It's a real problem. And look, we want to do right by the people. But in the final analysis, you have to be able to pay your bills. So you have to find ways to live within your means. And healthcare is important. I'm just looking at some of the comments that are popping up on our screen. Absolutely, it's important. But what do you do when you all of a sudden don't have healthcare anymore because you've gone bankrupt? And there are examples of countries, and I'm not talking Venezuela here, that have actually ended up hitting the fiscal wall and having to drastically just slash at programs like healthcare, like welfare, etc., because they just couldn't raise the money anymore. And look, there's no point in pretending that this isn't a problem. Federally, with the last budget, I mean, we're looking right now, as of today, somewhere in the order of $1.2 trillion is our federal debt. Somewhere in the order of $500 million or $500 billion is our provincial debt in Ontario or thereabouts. You can't simply say healthcare is too important, therefore we have to keep on borrowing money to pay for it. Maybe in a fantasy world that works, but in the real world, Here's the deal: healthcare, housing is important to us. But if I can't afford to live in a 5 bedroom house, and I have to live in a 2 bedroom house, and maybe the kids have to double up and sleep in bunk beds, if that's what I have to do in order to be able to afford housing, then that's what you have to do. You can't simply say it's too important. It is important. It's vitally important. But at the end of the day, if you can't pay for it, nobody gets health care. So, I
Well,
mean,
the
that's
question
sort
I
of
would ask is
the
what
big picture.
the question I would ask is what if you had a gold-plated healthcare system where everything was paid for and you got world-class healthcare. I mean, best surgeons, best doctors, best hospitals, you name it, the top of the list of everything. But you don't have a place to live because you can't afford a home. How important is healthcare now? I'm not saying it's not important. Don't get me wrong,
Right.
but I'm
Right.
saying everything in its season, right? You have to be able, if we're going to, because we could afford, if the government would stop wasting money on things like, oh, I don't know, COVID, or on refugees that are pouring over the border again at Roxham Road, which is another topic we can get into a little bit later tonight. Throwing money away at third world despotic dictators, tin pot dictators that will, excuse me, that will never see again. Green energy plans that are not going to make a hill of beans difference. All they're doing is pouring good money down green holes. Maybe we could afford a better healthcare system without bankrupting the country. But they're so bound and determined to spend every nickel they get their hand on and then go borrowing more to spend that. And this is true of every level of government I can think of.
Well, look,
Municipal,
and not,
provincial, and federal. They're all doing
yeah,
it.
it's and every level of government, and not just liberal governments, but conservative governments, or nominally conservative governments, are doing this as well. Look, the thing is like this, okay? We have become so ideologically attached to this notion that we have to have single payer universal health care, and it's a bit of a utopian fantasy, and we had it for a little while, but we don't have it anymore. What we've done is we still have single payer universal health care to the extent that we actually have health care, but there are lots of things now where people are not getting the kind of treatment that they should be getting. Now, I'm not saying privatize the system, but we have to be able to have we have to have a conversation about it. Listen, we have in this country a healthcare system where nobody pays anything for their basic health care. Nobody pays anything for hospitalization. Nobody pays anything for treatment. And so if you want to look at the economics of this, Nick, it's simply this: you have an unlimited demand based on the fact that the consumers out there, and that's who patients are. Patients are consumers of healthcare. There's no market discipline. There's no connection between their consumption level and the cost of consumption. So consumption keeps on going up and up and up and up and up, at the same time that we're trying to find ways to restrict access to healthcare by limiting the number of what doctors can make, because because it's out of control. The amount of money that we're spending on healthcare, we're looking for ways to cut corners here, make savings there, and the result of that is that we have a limited supply of healthcare. In other words, rationing. So here we have limited supply of healthcare plus an unlimited demand on healthcare. And it doesn't take an advanced degree in economics to understand what that means. That means upward pressure on prices. So it's like the only thing, we tried wage and price control in this country on a national scale back in 1973 or 74 or thereabouts under Pierre Trudeau, okay? And then we threw that policy out because we learned it didn't work. Except we've kept it in healthcare, and this is what drives the price up, and the costs up, and or at least it's one of the factors. So what I'm saying is we have to have a mature conversation about this. People have to learn that, you don't have to run to the doctor every time you have a sniffle or your child has a sniffle. You have to learn how to look after yourself. You have to learn how to look after your children. Okay. And we have to have a certain amount of rationality to our healthcare system. And I could make that argument in virtually every area of public policy today. It's just people are just enamored by this idea of getting free things. And now what are we doing? We're talking about free drugs, and not only free drugs, but free dental work for certain age groups. It's a problem. In a perfect world, and if we didn't have to pay for anything, okay, fine. But we don't live in a perfect world. We live in the real world, and we need to start living like we live in, acting like we live in the real world. That's my diatribe there.
Yeah.
That's my.
Okay. Well, you know what? As much as I don't want to do this, it is bottom of the hour. So let's take a quick break. So for those who have to trot off and go to the bathroom and maybe grab a quick drink, we'll do that. And then we'll be right back with more on the Nick and Joe Show right here on Blast the Radio. Okay, I think that means we're back. Welcome back to
Oh,
the Nick and Joe Show, folks.
there's Nick's
Thanks for
internet.
staying with us.
Nick,
What did I do now? What? I was just saying, welcome back to everybody. Thanks for staying with us. And that we're we're ready to go for our second half of the hour, or for the second half hour. All right, let's move along here.
don't use.
I thought
Hang on,
one of
hang
the
on,
things.
hang on. What's this? Don't
What?
use the emergency room. Don't use the emergency department
Emergency.
of hospitals as a walk-in clinic. That's great advice, because that's what happens. I always find it
Absolutely.
funny. It's really, I got to tell you, Nick, it's really funny because you have your local clinic, and it's funny because a lot of these guys like to market themselves as urgent care clinics, except for after hours. You call your urgent
Yeah, but they
care
don't want
clinic and they tell you,
emergency, do they?
if this is an emergency, go to your local hospital. Okay, you go, yeah. I guess we're not really into urgent care. I think clinics are a great thing, by the way. But yeah, absolutely, that's the really, really great advice. Don't use the emergency room as a clinic. Wait until the next morning. Go to your local walk-in clinic. See a doctor there. That's the best advice I've
If
seen
you
so
are
far.
in serious distress, by all means, go to. Oh yeah, if you are in serious distress, absolutely use the emergency room. That is, you would put it a sniffle, or some minor injury that can wait. That can wait till you can either see your doctor or go to, a walk-in clinic. And I agree with you. I think a properly run clinic is probably going to be, at least in part, the future of medicine in this country. I've used one once about 4 years ago. I had a throat infection. I didn't know it. And it kept getting harder and harder to swallow. And I felt like crap. And I did some homework online, found out which clinics had good reviews, picked one, went in. I was in and out with my prescription and a diagnosis in half an hour. I mean, I barely sat down, and they called my name, and in we went. A couple of doctors had a look at me, and I was out again after stopping at their pharmacy, which was right in the clinic, with everything I needed. And I was, within 2 or 3 days, I was fine. So I think that these clinics.
Yeah.
Now,
Well,
this
look,
brings up another question.
That was
because a lot of people. Go on.
No, I was going to say your experience with a clinic was probably a little better than the average experience. But that's them's the breaks. Okay, you go, and you have to wait. So maybe you have to wait a little longer than half an hour, and maybe it's crowded, and maybe it's a little chaotic or whatever. But for pity's sake, don't go and tie up emergency staff because you have the sniffles, or you have a headache, or you have a sore throat. Unless it's really serious, you think maybe you might be having a stroke or something. That's a different thing. But a lot of people that end up in the emergency
that's what I mean. If you are in
rooms
serious distress,
are really people that ought not to be there. So listen, at the risk of offending people, it's an emergency room. So save it for emergencies, guys.
and we also have to get people to understand what constitutes an emergency. Look, if you've dislocated a finger, or you might need a stitch for something, is it serious? Well, it hurts, no doubt about it, and pain management is important. But don't be mad if you're in there waiting to get a stitch and somebody gets wheeled in with a heart attack. They're going to take him first. So, let's understand what emergency means. Now, the other question that this raises, in my mind at least, is why are family physicians so hard to find? And I have a couple insights on this I want to share. I think I might have talked about
Right.
this last week or maybe the week before, but the bottom line is that one of the reasons why general practitioners are so hard to find is because that is not where the money is in medicine. The money is in specialists. If you become a orthopedic surgeon or a thoracic surgeon, or if you become some kind of highly technical, specialized medical professional, they make great money. And I'm not knocking that. I am not. Yeah, actually, Craig makes a good point. If you charge everyone who goes to the emergency room $25, they might think twice. That's the maybe that's a user fee. In other words, is what he's talking about. But I just saw that pop up and I thought that's a good point. Anyway, but the point is, a lot of people get into medicine. They go in for some very altruistic reasons. They want to help heal people. They want to be there and help them with their, live long and healthy lives. And when they get buried under a mountain of paperwork, government regulation, and they're limited and capped in how much they can make by the number of people they can see in the run of a day, um, even though they're treated, they are actually a private business that bills OHIP for their services. OHIP limits how much they can make. Then they have to ask themselves, why am I doing this? And the second thing is, we have doctors who come here from other countries that they won't let into the profession. That they, some of these guys, I know it's the old story about the guy came from another country and ended up driving a cab, even though he's got a PhD, he's a medical doctor. I'm sure those kind of things happen, but in general, those kind of things do happen. Maybe not, they don't get turned into doctors, but they don't work into cabbies, but they don't end up working in their field of profession because of the way that we regulate how people become doctors. And I think there's a lot of changes that could be made there. Like if someone comes from, I'll just pick a country, let's say the Czech Republic. They come from Czech Republic, they're medical doctors, fully licensed in the Czech Republic, and yet, you know, basically they have to go back and start all over again if they want to be a doctor in Canada. Why not let them sit and write an exam here, an entrance exam? If they pass, they get an internship every year or so under the supervision of a Canadian doctor. And if they survive that, then give them their license. Why put them through the ringer if they've already been trained as a medical doctor from a first world country gone to a
Well, you
decent
raise a good
medical
point.
school, one that we all respected? Yeah.
You
Why
raise
are we
point,
doing
Nick,
that?
and well, and I'm not defending that system. I think that not just with doctors, but I think that we unfortunately we fail to recognize the expertise and the credentials of skilled workers from around the world, not just in the medical profession, but in the trades, etc. So I think you're making a very good point.
Oh, fair enough. But we were
But
talking
I
about
would even go further. I would go further. I mean, first of all, OHIP caps what a GP, a general practitioner, can bill every year. So once you reach your cap level, like if you worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for 6 months, and you reach your cap level, why would you continue to work? Like, first of all, you can't provide. It's really such a crazy system when you think about it, because you can't keep on seeing patients for free. I mean, you could, as long as the government doesn't catch you. Okay. So once you've reached
Yeah.
your cap, why would you continue to work? Why not take 6 months off? So the system, again, in our effort to cut costs or to control costs, what we're actually doing is we're creating the conditions that push costs up anyway. It's just basic economics. But there's I think there's a bigger question with regards to general practitioners, and that is, are they really necessary? And I hate to ask that question. I'm not trying to be insulting to any doctors out there who happen to be GPs, but I just find that when I go to see my doctor, 9 times out of 10, it's only to get a reference to a specialist. But a specialist won't see you unless you've had a referral from a GP. So the big question you have to ask yourself is, if all you're doing is getting a referral, why do you have to see a doctor at all? And hence now you start talking about this category called nurse practitioner, where they
Right.
don't have the same training, the same years of training as a doctor, but they're certainly capable of diagnosing certain illnesses, writing prescriptions, and referring you to a specialist in those cases where they require a specialist. So it's but once again, we're locked into this failing system because nobody wants to talk about it, because it's politically, people like to describe it as the third rail of Canadian public policy. You can't tamper with healthcare. And my question is, well, if we can't fix the problems, then who cares whether we're tampering with it or not? It's not going to last forever. The system at some point in time is going to cave in on itself. So, there are so many things in government that we do that are just not working anymore. Maybe they didn't work at all, but we're not allowed to fix them. And it's so
Well,
frustrating.
I think a lot of it has to do with the way the industry is structured and the way that people get reimbursed in the upper management regions. Craig makes a great point. I should point this out, that he says, give foreign doctors who pass a test their license fast tracked and under conditions they spend 3 to 5 years in a smaller market, because smaller markets like Barry's Bay or like Sioux Lookout or like, Blackburn Hamlet, I don't know, just I'm picking names out of a hat here, uh, are having a hard time finding GPs to serve the public in those areas. And that's why some
Yeah.
people wait years to find a doctor, if they find one at all. I think
But
he's got
but
right on. I
yeah,
certainly
well, but I don't
appreciate
agree,
his
Nick.
point of view.
I understand the sentiment. I know where Craig is coming from, but I'm not in favor of telling people where they have to work and not work. Look, the free market
Well,
is the way it is. If we have a shortage of doctors, that's the problem. The problem isn't that they're not going to small markets. If we had more doctors, then doctors would go to the small markets because it's less expensive to live there. So and you get a better quality of life. So the problem in
well,
small markets is the same problem in big markets. If you're living in Toronto, you're still going to have
now
trouble finding a family physician.
I'm going to kind of stick to my guns here and stay with Craig's point, because we've done this in other areas. When a skilled trade comes to Canada, we at least traditionally we look at what skill sets they bring and where we can best employ them, and tell them, do you want to come here? Fine, we'll let you in, but here's the conditions under which you gain entry. And because it's our house and they want entry in and be part of the family, then there's certain conditions we can apply. It's not that you would never be able to leave, but just like joining the military, when you sign your initial contract, it's for, I don't know what it is today, but let's say somewhere between 3 and 5 years. You agree that under those 3 and 5 years, you will go where you're told to go and do what you're told to do. And that's just how you serve the country. Now, I don't look at doctors at the same way I look at military. They're both vital to our economy and to our country as a free society. And I agree with you as far as the idea of the free market should have the final say. But at the same time, I think we do have the right to impose upon people certain conditions if they want to come and become a member of the family. And that,
Well,
in order to best serve the people who are already here, might include living someplace they wouldn't ordinarily choose. And don't mean just in the north, but what if there was a shortage of people down in Essex County, down near Windsor? What if there's a shortage of people out in Nova Scotia, or doctors? I mean,
but you're having
send them out
the
there
point,
until they.
but the point you're missing, Nick, is that there's a shortage of doctors everywhere. And you know what? Here's the thing. I don't I object to the term free society when we're talking about telling people where they have to settle because they happen to come into this country. And they're not going to just work at McDonald's. If you're a skilled worker, and the country and the trade unions and the government accept your skills, and if you have to be licensed, then be licensed, okay? Then you're going to go to where the work is. And so, if the more people we have in the medical profession, the more people who are going to go out and service those small communities. The fact that the small communities are not being serviced is not a reflection of lack of control or direction as to where people go and work. The fact is that if there's too much control right now over the industry, and it suppresses the number of people who are actually becoming doctors, or choosing to become doctors because it's not that big a profession anymore. I know a lot of doctors that struggle to make ends meet because they just don't make the kind of money that they used to make. So I don't know. Is that a good thing, a bad thing? I don't know. But what I'm saying is that it's important to remember that it's just as hard to find a general practitioner, a family doctor in Sioux Lookout, Ontario, as it is to find one in Toronto. And it's that's just a fact.
Well, I guess you and I, we could spend a lot of time hashing this out. Unfortunately, we're not in a position to pull the trigger and make decisions. And even as Craig points out, what about a trial period to see if it works and be willing to abandon it if it doesn't? Because who knows? We're not in the medical. Neither one of us is in the medical profession.
Well, I don't.
So we're basically
it's
outsiders.
Not a medical. I'm sorry. It's not a medical problem. Okay, it's a market problem. It's an economic problem, and the economic rules of economics work in the medical profession and in the electrician's profession and in the farming profession. And again, remember this, okay? You're going to have we don't live in utopia, so yeah, guess what? You're going to live in places where you're not going to have full services, and that's just the reality. And if you happen to choose to live in a town, a small village, an hour's drive from the big city, and there are no doctors that happen to be there, and I know what that's like, having grown up in the country. Guess what? That's the way it is. And I let me tell you what our experience was very briefly. We actually had a country doctor, and you had to go not to the city, you had to go to the local village. Okay, like if you're living on a farm, half an hour out of the village, you still don't have the kind of medical care that you might have if you live in a big city. So guess what he would do? He actually would go out on house calls. Okay. And you know what we would do? We would pay a little bit extra. My parents would pay a little bit extra for the house call. And everything was working perfectly till the government stepped in and said, oh, you can't extra bill anymore. And so, he figured, well, then I'm not going to go out on house calls anymore because I can't make back the cost of fuel and the extra time that I'm doing it. But I guess the bottom line for me is, okay, Nick, is let's stop looking for the perfect solution, okay? There is no perfect solution. We don't live in utopia, okay? Let's stop trying to build the kingdom of heaven on earth, okay? There's a reason why the earth is the earth and heaven is heaven. And I can wait for utopia until I get to heaven. Hopefully that's where I'm going to end up.
Well, I agree with you. I will agree with you on that. And I hope that the flying and the fishing is as good up there as it is down here.
And if we can't stand it, we're heading up to Wally's place in Churchill.
Oh, listen, I'm going to hold him to that. I'm going to get up there somehow. If I have to crawl, I'm going to get there. But so it's been, I'll tell you, it's been a lot. Did I tell you what my wife said to me? This is a little way off topic, but just for fun. My wife uttered a sentence. I've known that woman for 40 years. And about 2 months ago, she said to me something that just knocked me off my chair. She said, "Guess what I got?" And I said, "I have no idea." She said, "My fishing license." And like,
Oh,
holy,
see, that's what happens
that
when you
was,
move up to. That's what happens when you move to Sioux Lookout.
I was a happy man. Don't get me wrong. I was a happy man. And now we're both in ground school working on getting a private pilot's license.
Yeah, yeah. And Nick, you can't. I got to tell you, you have not lived until you've done about 6 hours of ice fishing with your wife.
Well, I've done about two or three.
Okay,
So
good,
we're halfway there.
good,
Yeah.
good,
So when we get back up north, it's gonna be a lot of fun. We're really looking forward to our time up north.
good.
All right.
You
It's a
deserve it,
couple
Nick.
minutes early, and I don't want to dig into a new topic. Some of the comments are. I'm loving the comment section tonight. By the way, guys, if you're out there making comments, uh, we can't obviously respond to all of them, but I don't know about Joseph, but I'm reading them all. I can't speak for Joseph. And the last comment posted was by Laurentian View Terry. I don't think I've seen you on the chat room before. I take it your last name, your first name's Terry. But he's saying lots of people are turning to Dr. Google to self-diagnose, which can be dangerous as well. He's right.
Yeah,
It,
not
Dr.
dangerous
Huey
to
Lysell.
me. You know,
Well,
I know it sounds. I know what I'm going to say sounds so cavalier and uncaring. Okay, but if you want to go to Google to self-diagnose, and you're comfortable with that, then by all means, that's your choice. Okay, it doesn't bother me in the least. I'm not responsible for saving you from you. That's it's. We have to get out of this notion that we are responsible for saving people from themselves. People have to start to take responsibility for their own actions. And that means from time to time, even when the price is steep, paying the price for your own decisions instead of leaving it out there for society and everybody else to look after what you do or don't do. So by
okay,
all
on
means,
that
look
part,
it up on Google if that's what turns your crank. God bless you.
okay, on that score, I will agree with you. I mean,
Okay.
I'm
So you're
still
not a
not
secret
completely
communist
convinced
after
on some
all.
of the points, but no, I'm not a secret. I'm not even close.
Okay.
I just think that he who pays the bill gets to decide how that bill is. If you're writing a check to cover the cost, and you have a big say in how it's generated in the first place.
And
So, but with that,
so
we got.
go ahead, Nick.
Go ahead, finish your thought. I was just going
Okay,
to
I
say it's
was
time to take a break, but you got a last. I'll give you the last word.
the last word is he who pays the piper pays. How's it? He who pays the piper chooses the tune. Okay, so my attitude is I don't
That's
want to
it.
pay the piper.
That'll work.
So you want to have your own band and your own tune, knock yourself out. Okay, that's what a free society is all about. And I'm we've really all of the things in the last couple of months, in the last 2 years that we are upset about. It's time for those of us who care about individual liberty to recognize that these things didn't just happen by accident. They happened because we've sowed the seeds of this. We set the table for government overreach on COVID, on emergency acts, on mandates and things like that. And you can't have this is one of those instances where you cannot have your cake and eat it. You either live in a free society or you don't. It's as simple as that. And I want to live in a free society, and I
All right.
understand the risks and the challenges incumbent in that. And I'm willing to be responsible for myself. Just leave me alone. Let me earn a living. Let me keep my money. Okay. and I'm not going to become a burden to you and to people out there.
All right. With that said, it's time for us to take our top of the hour break. Hour 2 is straight ahead here on the Nick and Joe Show on Blast the Radio. Stay with us. We'll be right back. And I believe we are back. This is the Nick and Joe Show, folks. If you're just joining us for the first time, I'm Nick. Wrong way. He's Joseph. Got to learn to point in the right direction. And we are the best part of this radio show, I'll tell you. Oh, well, I must admit, the guy behind the scene that you don't really see, John, is doing a tremendous job. Thank you, John. We certainly do appreciate your efforts. And I do not mean to leave you out of the loop. All right. I wanted to take.
There's John.
Uh-oh. There he is. Yeah, he's in there somewhere. Anyway, I thought what we might do is have a little, because everybody else is. So let's have a little fun with Sleepy Joe Biden. Now, I don't know, Joseph, if you've been following what's going on down in the States. I've been watching a lot of news channels down there. And, oh, man, in some ways, it's so sad. In other ways, it's just hilarious. And Anthony, welcome to the show. I was watching a clip, and Joe Biden gave a speech. Okay, and who knows what was on, because he only showed the last 30 seconds of the speech. He said, and in America, there's nothing we can't do. God bless America. And he turned to his right, and he stuck out his hand to shake it, and there was nobody there. I mean, there were people in the audience, and there's people on either side of the stage, but there was, how you got to be within a certain distance before you shake somebody's hand? He stuck his hand out, and there was nobody there. And then for about a minute or two, he wandered around behind the podium like a lost little puppy till somebody took him by the elbow and showed him where he needed to go. Then they showed him on an Easter fest, I think, in the Rose Garden, I think, where he gathered a bunch of kids together, he and his wife, and together they read a book to the children, a children's book. And she had to show him what to read and when to stop reading. And there was and I'm not making this stuff up. This is another clip. He's up and he's welcoming everybody to the Rose Garden. And he says, welcome to the Rose Garden. And everybody applauds, and she waves. And you can hear her over the mic say, Joe, wave. So he lifts his hand and he waves. Just one incident. Barack Obama went to the White House. He had a gala event. The president of the United States, you would think, would be the center of attention. And Obama is got people all over him. And Joe walks up behind him, and he puts his hand on Obama's shoulder. He says, Obama. Barack doesn't pay him any attention at all. None. Reaches out, tries it again. Barack, nothing. He will not respond. And the president stood there in the middle of this crowd, lost. Nobody wanted to talk to him. Unbelievable. It was sad, really, to see what is supposed to be the most powerful secular man on the planet reduced to that. It really was. It was also really funny to watch if you're not a Biden fan.
Well, I would recommend.
Joe. I like that.
I would, first of all, it's clear that when he turned to shake somebody's hand, you just didn't know that the Easter Bunny was there, but it was invisible. So, you got to give the guy a little bit of a break. Okay, Nick. Having said that, look, yeah. There's a great. I highly recommend that people go to YouTube and they look up Weekend at Bernie's. Okay, and I think there's a trailer for Weekend at Bernie's, and you have to watch the trailer Weekend at Bernie's, or better yet, you have to watch the movie before you check out Weekend at Biden's, because it's a short video, but it's a complete takeoff from Weekend at Bernie's,
is that the one the Saudis made?
Pardon me?
Is that the one the Saudis made? The Saudis did a parody of Joe Biden and Kamala. I'm just wondering if that was the same one.
No, because Kamala. I don't think Kamala's in it, if my memory serves me correctly. But
Okay.
it's quite funny. I'm not aware of this video you're talking about that the Saudis made,
Yeah,
but
the Saudis made one make poking fun at Joe Biden, and it was
okay,
just it was
yeah. No,
like it was terrible by our standards, but the fact they thought they could do it was what was funny,
no,
because they didn't do this about
Anthony
Biden.
Anthony mentioned that the movie Weekend at Bernie's was hilarious. Anthony, if you go on YouTube, if
Yeah,
you've seen the movie, then go to YouTube and look up "Weekend at Biden's" and play that video because you'll get a chuckle out of
the
it.
string in the
You
hand.
don't understand it unless you understand the movie "Weekend at Bernie's," but
That's right.
it's definitely
The
worth a
funniest
chuckle or
part of
two.
it, the funniest part of Weekend at Bernie's is when the boss, the dead guy's toupee falls off, so they staple it back to his head with a stapler. I mean, oh my god, that was hilarious. I remember watching that when it came out. I don't know how well it's aged, but if you've seen it before and you cast Biden in the caricature of the boss who brings the two, well, I won't tell you if you haven't seen the movie, go watch it. You'll get it. I'll leave it at that. But oh
Right.
man, stapling his toupee to his head was priceless. Anyway, so yeah, the sad part about all this, though, is it really is a decline in the influence of the United States on the world stage.
It's a
Right
big
now,
problem. Yeah.
it is a big problem. Like Kamala Harris has been told by a bunch of news pundits, just stay home. As a matter of fact, she's been invisible for the last 2 weeks. Nobody knows where she is. She hasn't made any public appearance, no statements. And I think the thing that really capped it for her before she went overseas to Poland and to, I don't know if she actually did go to Ukraine, but she went to Poland for sure. But when she tried to explain the Ukrainian situation to the American public, and she started out saying, well, there's this country called Ukraine, and it's a big country. And there's this other country called Russia, and it's an even bigger country. And they invaded Ukraine, and that's not good. She sounded like she was talking to 3-year-olds. And I think that really insulted a lot of people. And now, even the mainstream media down there who have done everything they can to keep this presidency afloat through the Hunter Biden and the laptop and all this other stuff, trying to say, well, it's not an issue. Well, it might have been an issue, but now they're admitting it's an issue, and they're fishing around for somebody else to run in the next presidential election. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that he doesn't make the end of this year, never mind the end of his term.
Well, that's really too bad. And, I feel bad because you hate to see anybody who is suffering from such a cognitive decline, let alone the president of the United States. But it's because he's the president of the United States that makes this particularly troublesome, particularly dangerous. And I'll go out on a limb here and I'll say this. I actually think that the invasion of Ukraine by Russia would not have happened except that Joe Biden is the president of the United States at this point in time.
That's not
I
a very
think that
thin limb.
I think that Putin made a calculation, and I don't think his calculation was necessarily wrong. That he couldn't that the Ukraine could not count on the support of the United States. And I don't think that was an unsafe calculation. I think it was a safe bet. Perhaps things have not worked out quite as the way that he would have intended things to work out. But in the final analysis, I don't think that Ukraine is going to win that war. I think that in the final analysis, the Russians are going to take the territory that they originally said they were going to take. And you want to call that a win for Ukraine, by all means. But in the final analysis, I think that that the Russians are going to take that territory in the eastern part of Ukraine, and I think that the rest of the world is going to heave a sigh of relief that the combat is over, and who knows, the Ukrainian government might also just accept that. Of course, this is just idle speculation. Bottom line is this: a weak American government is dangerous for the world.
I absolutely agree with you. And Craig is saying that he's clearly incapable of performing his duty to America. He should never have been allowed to take the seat of the presidency. Well, you know what?
Well,
Whether or not, here's the comment I have on that. Craig, you're right. I don't think he is up to the job, but they went through the electoral process no matter what you think of it, and he is the president. We have to live with that. But going back to Ukraine for a minute, every war waxes and wanes. And, sometimes one team is winning, sometimes the other team is winning. I think where Putin made his mistake was thinking that Ukraine was just going to roll over, and that, he's had success in other areas like Syria and different countries around the world where they've had been involved militarily. They've had some success, and he expected the same thing here. But the Ukrainians had different ideas. What's that old saying about first contact with the enemy? Your best laid plans only last until you meet the enemy. And I think that's what happened to Putin. He wasn't expecting the kind of resistance that he got. The Ukrainians just sank his flagship in the Black Sea Fleet, or in the Black Sea Fleet, the Moskova or something like that.
The Moskva.
Moskva, that's it. Which is a 12,000-ton ship armed to the teeth. I mean, this thing had about 4 or 5 layers of protection so that anti-ship missiles couldn't take it out, and they fired 2 and sank the thing. That's a huge.
If you believe the Russians, they just had a fire. That's all.
Well, okay. Now that's something. I'm glad you said that, because the problem with this whole conflagration is that it's hard to know who to believe. You can call it the fog of war if you want, but on one hand, you've got people saying, Zelensky is almost your Chilean, and which is not true. On the other hand, you've got people saying that Russia is committing genocide. You and I talked about this before the show. No, they're not committing genocide. Are they committing war crimes? Yes, but he is not targeting, just for the sake of the listener, because I know you and I, we kicked this around before, but a genocide is an attack by one group against another to completely exterminate the group that's being attacked. I mean, every man, woman, and child. That's a genocide. We saw it in World War II with the Holocaust. We saw it in the Balkans, in Chechnya, and in Croatia and Serbia and places like that, where that was attempted. We've seen it in Africa. So yes, there are cases where there are real attempts at genocide, but Russia is not doing that. I'm not trying to paint them as anything but the bad guys. They were the ones who pulled the trigger on this war. And whatever you think of Ukraine and its, political situation, nobody has the right to do that unprovoked. Like, Ukraine didn't attack Russia. Russia attacked Ukraine. And that makes them the bad guys. But with that said, I think that when we start throwing terms around like genocide, like, Holocaust and all these things, we cheapen the term. And when it should be reserved for only the most outrageous cases. Like, have you ever met anybody who everything was amazing, no matter what it was, or incredible or fantastic? Every descriptive word they used, that was it. Well, after a little while, it doesn't mean anything anymore because they use it all the time. So we have to be very careful about when and how we apply these labels to make sure that when we do use them, they mean something. And I don't think Russia is guilty of genocide. I think they're guilty of starting a war. I think they're guilty of war crimes. I think they are the aggressor, but I don't think they're genocidal.
Yeah, there's very little that I could add to that, Nick. I obviously I agree with you. I was quite surprised when I heard President Biden use the term, and then of course our Prime Minister here in Canada, Justin Trudeau, almost couldn't wait to jump onto that bandwagon. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, okay, I just did they have they committed war crimes? Probably. Are they the aggressor? For sure. I'm not, as with you, Nick, I'm not defending them at all, not even the slightest bit. But genocide, I'm not even defending them from having been accused of committing genocide. I'm saying that the term genocide, I'm defending the integrity of the term genocide. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think we both
Um,
are. Yeah.
it's you cannot throw that kind of terminology around so loosely, so flippantly. It completely undermines the meaning of the term, the gravity of the accusation, and I'll even go so far as to say that it's insulting and offensive to the victims of a real genocide. So
Absolutely.
it's enough already. Stop it. It's not it's not a genocide. Let's deal with the real world the way it really is. We don't have to engage in pointless and silly hyperbole in order to make people understand that what the Russians have done here is wrong.
I think Craig's comment is a good one. He's just backing up what we're saying. He says, "You're a racist to a liberal who disagrees with you. The racist card is overplayed. It no longer has meaning." That's the whole point, Craig. You're quite right. Is that when you overuse a term, no matter what term it is, when you overuse it, it loses its meaning. And
And
that's why Joseph and I are both on the same page on this, because we want, when you see a real, because if you use the word genocide every time somebody engages in combat, uh, then what do you say when you run into a real genocide? Genocide on steroids? No, that doesn't work. Genocide's a very, very powerful word and should only be used in the most um, extreme cases. And any other application would be inaccurate and wrong.
And apropos to the comments, I believe it was Craig that just made them about racism and racist. At the risk of making our liberal friends' heads explode, figuratively, guys, not literally, figuratively, then I would say this: anytime that you invoke race you differentiate between people based on race, whether your differentiation is a positive thing or a negative thing, so long as you're basing it on race, you're the racist. So to all of my
Yeah.
liberal friends out there who like to accuse people like me and you, Nick, and I suspect a number of our listeners of being racist because we're opposed to race-based policy, um, uh, here's the news, guys. You're the racists. Anytime you base policy on race, that is racism. And you're either blind, racially speaking, and your policy, it treats everybody as human beings, full stop, without the racial differentiation, or you base your policy on race, in which case your policy is racist. So the truth is, they're the racists, not us. And
Yeah,
we need to call them out on it. And it's an accurate terminology in this case. It's an accurate accusation. And we should not be afraid to call these people racists because they are. And they might not like it, but yeah, they're racists, and we should be saying so.
something. I think I'm just kind of looking what Craig just said, and I think that one of the reasons why you'll never get our political masters to admit to that is because it's too convenient a playing card. It when they think what they've obviously never encountered me, because if somebody calls me a racist or a bigot or whatever, you put the acronym on, my first response is, yeah, okay, fine. Now let's get back to the issue at hand and bat it aside. That's one of the best ways to, in my mind, of dealing with it, is don't even engage with that. Like when somebody says, well, you're a bigot or you're a racist or you're a homophobe. Yeah, whatever. Now let's get back to the topic. I want an answer to this question. And where's the money going to come from, if that's what it is? Just, in other words, don't let them steal the conversation away by throwing out this card. But it's an old habit they have. And the more you use it, the harder that habit is to break. And I think that's why they won't admit it, that they're the racists. Because first of all, that means they have to look in the mirror and admit to the guy staring back at them, they were wrong. And just like David Suzuki and global warming, that's not gonna happen. You got to get rid of these people first and foremost. Take them out of office, use the ballot box to do it, get rid of them, and put people in who are willing to be held accountable for not only their actions, but what words they use, because words have power. And when you start throwing around words and calling whole groups of people this or that, just because it's politically expedient, you cheapen not only your oath of office, but the very office itself.
I knew you were going to find a way to get David Suzuki and global warming into the conversation, Nick.
Every chance I get, buddy. Every chance I get.
It's only been an hour and a half.
Well, I wanted to get it in before the show was over.
Well, and you succeeded.
I did. I don't succeed at much, but I got that pulled off.
I don't know that David Suzuki is a racist. I just think he's stupid.
I didn't mean he was a racist. That's not what I was driving at. I was driving at the fact that he has so much political capital invested in climate change, he'll never admit he was wrong.
I think that David Suzuki is a fool. Well, I said he was stupid. I take that back. I don't really know whether he's stupid or not, but I think he's a total fool. He's a buffoon. And David, if you want to sue me, you know where to find me.
That's right. Right here. But my point was, JT has too much political capital built into being a racist to ever admit he is.
Okay, but look, I don't care whether he admits it or not. My advice is call him out on it, and if it sticks, it sticks. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Look, our job is not to win the battle. Our job is to fight. And if we fight back, then at some point in time, we're going to start to have our victories. But we cannot look for a guarantee of victory as a criteria for fighting back against this tomfoolery claptrap. Okay, we need to. It's not just a question of taking back our country, which is what a lot of the freedom movement has been all about. Okay, it's about taking back the English language. It's as basic and as fundamental as that. And so, again, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose. It doesn't matter whether you're going to have an impact or not. Get out there and speak your mind on this stuff. And when you hear people defending race-based policies, you point out to them, that's racism. That's the classic definition of racism. It doesn't matter if you're doing it for benevolent reasons. You could be, somebody coined the phrase, the road to hell is paved with the best of intentions.
That's right. All right. With that said, it's time for us to take our last break. We shall be right back on the Nick and Joe Show. You're listening to BTR Radio. We'll be right back after this. Okay, folks, this is the final home stretch for the Nick and Joe show. Uh, glad you've stayed with us. And if you're new to the show, welcome. Um, excuse me. The chat room has been really busy tonight, which is great to see. And we do read them all. Um, Sometimes we can build them into the conversation, and sometimes you guys, you know what, Joseph and I have noticed this before about our particular chat room. Sometimes they take on a life of their own. They start People in the chat room just start talking about things that have nothing to do with what we're talking about. And you know what? That's okay. If you see a comment you want to take down a rabbit hole, be our guest. We're just glad you're here. All right. One of the things, Joseph, I wanted to bring up. There's this.
Just a
Go
second
ahead.
now. Hang on.
Yeah.
Before we do, I just want to say one thing. I was just reading Craig's comment about getting rid of the Liberals and the Liberal NDP coalition, and supporting Pierre for Prime Minister, and that's all very fine and dandy. But you know, we have to be vigilant with Pierre and the Conservative Party too. We cannot afford to let our guard down. They may be more suitable and more along the lines of more aligned with our thinking than the current Liberal NDP coalition is.
Right.
I grant that, but let's not be naive. Let's not pretend that there aren't left wing pressures within the Conservative Party itself. And so, you know, it behooves us to really continue to keep the pressure on the Conservative government, assuming that the Conservatives win the next general election, whoever the leader is. If it's Pierre, great. But you know, I'm not going to. Speaking for myself, I'm not going to cut Pierre a whole lot of slack. I wouldn't cut any of them a whole lot of slack. We have to remember that in a democracy, we're the government, and they just happen to be representing us. And if they're not representing us, even if they're doing a better job than the other guys were, then they have to be accountable to us as well. So I just wanted to make that point, Nick.
I think it's a great point, because let's face it, we need to be at least as hard on our team as we are on the other guys. And this is why I'm so disgusted with Doug Ford and what he's doing in Ontario. You know,
Yes,
he was elected under the blue flag, and
yeah,
yet he's not acting very much like somebody who supports conservative values.
right.
He's doing everything else.
This is not a hockey game. It's not our team versus the other team.
All right.
It could very well be that our team we think is better, but if our team goes off the rails, then we have to hold them just as accountable as we want to hold the Liberals in the NDP or anybody else.
I guess that's what I'm trying to say. I'm just using hockey analogies because my Leafs are in third overall, and they're playing some amazing
You're just
hockey right now, and
They
it's
are
fun to watch.
playing. They are, but they're just toying with you, Nick. The collapse is coming.
You know what? And I know they say it every year, but this year is different.
Yeah.
Anyway, we won't go down that rabbit hole. Not tonight. There's too many other things to talk about. But when you're talking about this pollster, which is where I was going with this story.
Frank Graves, yes.
Yes,
Ecos.
from Ecos. He has said, now he tweeted it and then deleted it because he probably went, uh-oh, what did I do? Because he tipped his hand. But he swears up and down he's going to make sure that Conservative Party leadership frontrunner Pierre Poilievre never becomes prime minister. All the while his firm is being paid by the Liberals. So, all right. Well, first of all, what's he going to do? All this does is really undermine how little credibility most polls have in people's minds. Is like governments, in general. People look at politicians across the board with suspicion at the best of times, and right now they're way down the list of people you respect, and it's tragic, but that's the truth. And pollsters are right there with them because they're the ones who put out numbers that the politicians use to support their cause and go after the other guy. So when he comes out and he says this, and the fact he's being paid by the Liberals, well, dude, what are you going to do? Run around stuffing ballot boxes? Do you think that's how it's going to happen? What exactly does he mean by that? Um, Pollsters are like referees. You going back to hockey analogies. They're supposed to be impartial, not all they're supposed to do is what's that old line from Dragnet? Just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts. They're that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to provide raw data without being filtered through ideological screens. And yet he's making it very plain that is not the case, at least in his case. I'm not
Well,
painting all pollsters with this, but certainly he didn't help his cause.
well, I'm he was let's say for starters that from a business point of view, what he did in taking this public stand was not such an intelligent thing to do. So
Yes.
that's the first thing. The second thing is, I don't really, the what you have to do with polls is you really have to look carefully at the methodology and the actual wording of the question, and because the way that questions are worded and the way that they're the method that the polling is done can have a significant impact on the outcome of the poll. So I don't care whether a polling company is particularly partisan one way or the other. I could tell whether the poll itself is a partisan poll, or more and more often these days, polling that's not necessarily consciously partisan, but that ends up skewing one direction or the other simply because some of the pollsters out there are not being sufficiently careful with the way that they're designing the polls. So in this case, I don't think he's done anything that's particularly bad in terms of the way the public should be digesting this stuff. Unfortunately, we have a lot of what's been called low information voters out there, so they're going to be gullible and they're not going to recognize problems that they ought to be able to recognize. And who knows? Maybe people like you and I, Nick, when it comes down to the provincial election and or the leadership race federally, the Conservatives are having their leadership race now. That we'll dissect some of these polls and we'll show how they actually, even if they weren't consciously designed to elicit a particular answer or set of answers, that's actually what ends up happening. So in this case, I would give Frank and Nikos a bit of a pass. I don't think that it's a bad that that they get business from the Liberal Party or from a Liberal government,
Well,
and I don't think that necessarily disqualifies them from doing polling, as long as people recognize what they're dealing with. That's the main thing. People have to
okay.
recognize what they're dealing with, and they have to look carefully at the way the polling is designed in order to determine whether or not it's a valid poll, and the results are valid.
Well, first of all, let me point out something that the Laurentian Valley Terry said. As Deep once said, polls are for dogs. So there's that. However, um,
I thought
I
that was
don't.
fire hydrants.
Well, a fire hydrant is just a short pole. At least
I know.
we
It was
didn't
a
have
very
fire
poor
hydrants.
joke.
Anyway, the point is that a lot of people, like, I don't think people get upset because everybody knows that a political party will hire a polling company to go out and do polling for them. That's part of how polling companies, that's part of the reason they exist. They fill that need. Okay, fine. But where I think it's a little more egregious than perhaps you're painting it is the fact he came out and said, I am going to do everything I can to make sure that guy does not ever become the Prime Minister of Canada. And I thought myself, that's not what you're there for. You are a referee in stripes. You're supposed to hand out the information that you've been paid to provide in an unbiased and as clear a way as possible so that, when we look at polls, because these polls come out, we look at them too, not just politicians, unless you're talking internal polling. Those kind of things, they don't don't sit very well with people. And again, it goes back to perception is reality. When people hear that, they think, who the hell are you to decide who's going to be the prime minister? I thought that was our job. Aren't we all supposed to get one vote per man? Isn't that how this all works? So,
Well,
that's what bothers me about it. It's just,
I get it.
admit you're
I get it.
have one.
I understand it. What he's done,
With the sledgehammer.
it doesn't sit well. I get it. It doesn't sit well with me. But in the final analysis, he's done us a favor by coming out and saying explicitly that he's biased. So now we know. So be extra vigilant when it comes to analyzing polls that are political, that are being put out by Ecos. So, again, the guy's being honest. I'll give him that much, okay? Even if he feels that he regrets it now because there was a backlash and he's taken the tweet down. So, but it's pretty hard to put that genie back in the bottle. Except to say this, Nick. I suspect that most people aren't aware of this. They're not going to be aware of it. It could be front page news in the Globe and Mail and the Toronto Star and the National Post tomorrow morning, and most Canadians still aren't going to be aware of it. And for those who are aware of it, most of them are going to forget about it anyway. I know that sounds cynical, and I don't mean to be, but all of this stuff is inside baseball stuff. And in the final analysis, it's all a pretty good explanation about why we should have as little government as possible, because all of this stuff is government is just a recipe for screw up. And I'm not anti-government. I think there's a role for government to play in society and in our country, as long as we recognize it for what it is, and we accept the fact that government is going to screw things up, because people screw things up, and government is nothing but the people running the show. And so I'm constantly surprised by people who are surprised by how silly and foolish and what's the word I'm looking for? Inefficient government, or even corrupt government, can be. Government is people, and people are just that way. And if you're looking for utopia, there's an assisted suicide program now you can take advantage of. Although I don't know about your theology, but I'm not sure that you're going to go to heaven if you take advantage of the assisted suicide program.
Let's just say that's a road I'm never going to explore. I do want to spend the last few minutes of the show, though, talking about another topic that I think I'm loving following the story, and that is Elon Musk's attempted takeover of Twitter. And because the more I learn about this guy, the more I like him. Yes, he's the wealthiest man on the planet. Okay. A lot of people don't like him, and they have some, in their minds, very valid reasons for not liking him. But something? People with his kind of creative genius are normally pretty eccentric. Like if you got to know, let's say Edison or Ford or Einstein or especially Howard Hughes, Tesla, you go down the list, all the great minds, the people who've produced, major steps forward in technology and in culture and in these kinds of things, were in any other area of their life, they were nuts. So are we surprised if Elon Musk has a few things about him that he doesn't, that, people look at and go, oh, I don't like that. Yeah, but look at what he's doing. He restarted this, the whole space program. He's given the world a relatively, by comparison, incredible internet at amazing speeds for a reasonable price. I mean, it's not cheap, but especially to get set up. But look, when you can get the kind of up and down speeds that he's got, and it doesn't matter where on the planet you are, that's a major technological leap forward. Now, he decided he wanted to take over Twitter because he was sick and tired of the censorship that was going on. Like you could have the mullah of Iran, some Saudi prince. You can have Putin. You can have all these horrible these people um, have a Twitter account, but Donald Trump, oh no, we can't have him. He's eccentric. He's eclectic. He's a lot of things, but he's a human being. And I think that Elon Musk just said enough of that, and he made them an offer they were fools to turn down. I'm not sure how economic poison pills work, but they injected one into his offer. And when asked about if they turn this offer down, he was in Vancouver doing a TV show, a TV interview. They said, "Is there a plan B?" And Musk just smiled and said, "Yeah, there is." So he's got something else up his sleeve. He is a brilliant man. The other thing I saw about him that I really liked was his idea that, contrary to popular belief, we don't have enough people on the planet. And that's that's the root of a lot of our problems. And we have to reverse that. It's one of these things that I looked at and I said, holy mackerel, he's right. Now, not because I'm as smart as he is, but it's obvious even to someone like me that a birth rate like Japan has, under 1, or Canada has about 1.5, is not enough to maintain your population. And the world population is shrinking, not growing. And he's pointing that out. So I went and I Googled. I said, okay, it's easy for him to say everybody needs to have more kids. But I looked it up. He's got 8. I thought I was the only one. He's got 8 kids. So he's not speaking from the point of view of somebody who says, hey, man, you had better go fix this problem. He's already been down that road. He's doing his best to, you don't expect somebody to repopulate the world all by themselves, but he's not afraid to put his money where his mouth is and stand up for what he believes in. And I admire that in people.
Well, I don't know whether I like him or not. I've never met the man, and I generally try to reserve judgment until I've actually met and had an opportunity to interact with people. So is he a nice guy? Is he not a nice guy? I don't know. Is he brilliant? He certainly has that reputation. He's been very successful in business. And as you point out, he may be a little eccentric. I don't know. He seems to be, but I've never met him. He's been quite inventive, and I guess when you're the richest man on the planet, you can afford to dabble in the kinds of things that he dabbles in, and this is how we get a lot of our inventions and a lot of progress, and it's worth pointing out that he's doing all of this stuff without government money, so he's not coming to you and me and saying, pay for me to provide internet service at a speed that is absolutely beyond the imagination of a lot of people. So I agree with you, and clearly my problem is that I'm not eccentric enough, because if I was more eccentric, then I might be more inventive, and I might end up inventing something that, I don't know, serves mankind's purpose or something. I don't know, Nick. You and I are just too normal. That's the problem, I think. Too vanilla.
Well, I've been called a lot of things, but normal isn't one of them. But to get back to the point, I just was struck by when you get to know the personalities behind these inventions. Alexander Graham Bell is another example. These guys, maybe it's because, have you ever tried to balance a wheel and get it wrong, and the wheel just kind of goes wobble, wobble, wobble all over the place? It's maybe like they're a genius in a particular area, and that so overcompensates for other parts of their lives, it throws them a little off balance. And I'm no psychologist by any stretch. I'm no Jordan Peterson, but I'm just making casual observation that might be behind the eccentricity. But you know what? For the kind of technological advances we're seeing because of this individual, I'll take the eccentricity. I'll put up with it. And for all I can see, For all I can tell, he stands up for free, believes in free speech. He's libertarian. I wouldn't call him a conservative. He's more libertarian, which is really rare amongst the, let's call it the elite of the day. They're very shadowy figures. They move in very different circles than he does. And that's part of what I like about him too. He's not one of these Jeff Bezos guys. He's not, a George Soros or some of these guys who are very wealthy, very influential, but very, very much against everything that we stand for.
Well, I have to, I have to buy the Washington Post so that I can tell you what to do with your life, so that I can save you from yourself.
Yeah, because Bezos owns it.
Look,
that's right. He owns Bezos owns it.
Yes, he does. As I said, I've never met Elon Musk. He certainly seems to be a smart person, and I give him all the credit for that. If it's really too bad that it's difficult today for a Thomas Edison to work in his shop inventing the light bulb. Who's going to be the inventor of the next light bulb? And is that possible anymore? Given all of the restrictions on free thinking. And free thinking, I don't just mean that in the political sense. I mean that in the inventive, if I could use that term, sense. The ability to just sit around and think, okay, what if I try this and what if I try that, and then end up having to be discouraged because you need this you have to satisfy this regulation. You can't work in your garage. You can't do welding in your basement. You can't. There are so many things that are impediments to just old-fashioned inventiveness, that until you actually sit down and think about it, you don't realize how much we stand in the way of people to come up with great inventions that are going to revolutionize the world. So I don't know what the next great invention is, but I do know that it's a lot harder to be a Thomas Edison or a Howard Hughes today than it was for them.
Yeah, that's very true. And Joseph, as much as I hate to bring this to an end, it's now a minute or two before the top of the show. So I want to thank all of our listeners and participants in the chat room. We really do appreciate your input, and we keep an eye on it. And when we can, we comment on it. It's a pleasure to have you there. And I certainly hope you go out and spread the word about the Nick and Joe Show here on Blast Radio. Tell people about it, and we can spread the word and spread the audience, or build the audience, and really drive home the point that if you want some good old-fashioned over a beer kind of conservative talk, from a common sense point of view, this is the place to get it, because nobody does a radio or a talk show like Joseph and I do. I can guarantee you that. All right, with that, I'm going to I'll bow us out for tonight. Thank you, John. You did a great job back behind the scenes. Joseph, I look forward to doing this with you again real soon. So we'll, the rest of you, we'll see you all again next week. In the meantime, what?
I was just going to say, hey, it's the Nick and Joe Show, so you can count on me being back.
All right, that's true, and we look forward to it. Okay, with that said, ubi caritas et amor, Dea sibi est. Good evening, God bless. Don't let anything disturb your peace, and may have a fair wind in the following sea.